So for my chips, I'm going to use some Maris Piper potatoes, and I've peeled these already. Quite often I don't peel them, I leave the skin on because when you eat them that gives extra fibre. But these potatoes, the skins weren't very nice on them. So I've peeled them and now I'm cutting them into small rectangular shapes. Not too thin. You could do skinny fries if you wanted to, but that's not traditional with fish and chips. So I'm holding the potato with what's called a bridge grip, appropriate as we're doing bridges as well in our theme. So I'm going to hold the potato at the sides and then cut slices that are just over 1 centimetre apart. Then lay it on its side, still using the bridge grip to cut the slices the other way to give me the chip shape. So I'm putting these into a colander because potatoes contain starch and they've got quite a lot of starch, and as you're cutting through the cells it releases the starch. So I've put these into a colander, so I'm now going to rinse them under cold water in the sink to wash the starch off them. So now I've rinsed the chips, I'm going to dry them before cooking them. Oops, that's one lost on the floor. So I've got quite a lot here, so I'm going to cook them in 2 batches. So I'm going to pat half of them really dry. Now the safest way to do deep frying is to use an electric deep fat fryer which is thermostatically controlled, so it's not going to catch fire. If you don't have one of those, then you can use a pan on a hob, but just take care, don't leave it unattended at all because you don't want it to burst into flames. So make sure that you have an adult with you when you're doing any deep frying. Now I'm doing mine in a pan of sunflower oil, and I'm actually using an induction hob rather than my hob behind me, just for 2 reasons. Firstly, having it there in front of me, you can see what I'm doing rather than having my back to you if I'm working on that hob. And I'm also using this one because this hob is actually thermostatically controlled, and I've set it to 140 degrees centigrade because for this first cooking of the chips I want to cook them in oil between 130 and 140 degrees. So I'm going to pick them up and carefully lower them into the hot oil. So you need to make sure you've dried them really well, because in science you might have learnt that oil floats on water. And also water, when it gets to 100 degrees, turns into steam and expands. So if you've got any water on these chips, it's going to try and get below the oil because the oil floats on it, but it expands very, very quickly. So it will spit out of the pan at you, which is something you don't want. You don't want any burns. So I'm adding these gradually to the pan. I'm lowering them down, taking care not to actually touch the oil, but if I were to just let them drop in, the oil might splash out at me. So these are double cooked chips. So these get cooked for about 10 minutes, and the idea of this first cooking is it's going to soften the potato. And then when we're ready to serve it, they get cooked again at a higher temperature to make them go crisp. So this pre-cooking stage, you can actually do several hours in advance, so you can have them all ready, and then when you're wanting to serve them, they'll only take a few minutes to cook through. So that's my damp kitchen roll. When they're cooked, I'm going to put them on this tray, which I've put some more kitchen roll on, which will help to absorb any fat that comes off them. And while they're cooking, just give a gentle stir with a metal spoon. So they need to be sort of lightly coloured, but not too coloured. but they need to be soft when they're cooked. So as I say, that will take about 10 minutes depending on the size that you cut them. So these have softened now. So I'm going to take them out using the slotted spoon and spread them out on the baking tray that I've lined with some kitchen roll. So once I've taken them all out of the oil, the first batch, I can then put the second batch in. Okay, so now I've added all of the second batch. I'm going to give them a stir so that they haven't stuck together. And you can see these haven't hardly coloured at all. They're still sort of quite pale, but they are soft and virtually cooked through. So I now need to leave these for another 10 minutes. Okay, so now I've got the chips partly cooked, I need to get the fish ready. I need to start heating the oil up so it's a bit hotter. It needs to be about 180 up to about 190. So I've increased the heat on that. And first thing I need to do is get some flour ready to coat the fish in. So this is 2 tablespoons of flour. It doesn't matter what type of flour. I've actually used plain flour, but plain or self-raising will do. And I'm adding some salt to it and some pepper, and I'm going to mix that in. And sort of spread it out a bit on the plate. Then to make the batter, I've got 75 grams of corn flour and 75 grams of self-raising flour, and I'm going to sift those together into a bowl. So sifting it helps to mix the 2 types of flour together, and it will also help to aerate it a little bit. It gives it a bigger volume because you're separating all the grains. Okay, so that's the flours mixed. Now I'm going to season this as well. I didn't put the salt into the sieve because I've actually got salt flakes which wouldn't have gone through the sieve. And some pepper. Then I'm going to mix that in. Now traditionally for beer batter you would use an alcoholic beer, but this is alcohol-free beer that I'm using because I didn't think your parents would like it if I started sort of putting lots of alcohol in recipes. So I've got in the jug here 200 millilitres of alcohol-free beer. It's actually Budweiser alcohol-free one I'm using. So I'm going to add that to the flour, but mix it just very lightly. The more you mix it, the tougher the batter becomes. So it doesn't matter if it's still looking a little bit lumpy. You just don't want to over mix it. So shake that off the beater. Now I'll move these out of the way because I don't need them. What I want to do before I put the fish in the batter is to coat it with that seasoned flour. So I patted the fish dry before I put it on the board, coat it well in the flour, and then do both sides of it in the batter, and then carefully lower it into the oil. So depending on the size of your pan, sort of depends how many of the fish fillets you can cook at one time. So with my pan, I think I can get 2 in there. So it needs to cook for 4 to 5 minutes on each side. So coat it in the batter and lower it gently in. So leave that 4 to 5 minutes before we then turn it. So after 3 to 4 minutes, just turn it over so it cooks on the other side. It's quite difficult to see how they're looking, but that's how it is at the moment. So it's nice and crisp on one side, so I'm just letting it crisp on the other side. So when it's had 3 to 4 minutes on the other side and it's looking nice and crispy, I'm going to take it out and put it onto a baking tray. And I'm going to put that into an oven, not too high a heat, I've got it on 120 degrees. I might just put it up to 150, just to keep those fish fillets warm while I'm cooking the other 2. So they get done in the same way, coating them in the flour and then the batter and then putting in. So if any bits of batter come off, you can fish them out and keep them warm. And where I come from in Cornwall, the fish and chip shop used to call those bits of batter scribbles. I'm draining the fish off and just skimming off any of the bits of batter, because they're nice little crispy bits you can have to go with it if you want to. And also it helps to get the bits of batter out before you're cooking the chips. So my fish is now cooked and I'm keeping it warm in the oven, so I need to crisp up the chips now. So I'm going to do half of these at a time, and again the oil needs to be hot as it was for the fish, at about 180 to 190 centigrade. So that temperature, if you don't have a thermometer, is you could cut a small square of bread and add it to the pan, and if it rises up to the surface and cooks in 2 to 3 minutes to a light golden colour, then that's the right temperature. So I'm going to do the chips in 2 batches as well. So it's bubbling a lot more in the pan now because it's hotter oil. Let's put those in as well. So when these are a nice golden, light golden colour, I'm going to take them out of the oil and put them onto a baking tray. These look so good, I wish I could eat one now. I think they'd be a bit too hot for eating. All out of the pan. I'm going to put these in the oven along with the fish and then cook the rest of these now until these are golden.